Hey everybody, this is Steve Van Diest. I am the co-host of the Sharpen Podcast. It's brought to you by Acumen. It's a growth community for CEOs and owners looking to start up, grow up, scale up, transition, but also grow your top line, optimize your bottom line, and enrich your storyline. Today, I'm excited because we're going to talk about a lot of those pieces. When you're getting an opportunity to buy a business, what are you looking for? The wisdom around building that business now for your own, but also those lessons learned. What should I have been looking for, and who as a different leader in the purchase of a business. And today we've got a fantastic member, Jeremy Hunka. He's a member on the Front Range here in Colorado of the Summit team. Jeremy is an expert in this area. He'll laugh, but I think he's an expert. I've gotten to know him for about a year because he's done all of that. And so, Jeremy, tell us a little bit how you got to this point. Who are you? What's your business? And give us that brief context.
Yeah, I'm Jeremy. We are Summit Cabinet Coatings. We are a cabinet refinishing specialist in Northern Colorado. So we're basically fancy painters, but we really do a full sort of restorative process to cabinets to make them look like brand new and get to keep what you already have as opposed to ripping them out. That's what we do. I was a chemistry major way back when who went into commercial real estate, who quit his job and bought a business about a year ago exactly. So that's what brought me here.
Yeah, I love it. Chemistry major. I'm an old math major, computer science major. Us nerds can unite and then gather in the business world.
Yes.
When you started this journey, how old were you when you started the journey?
I started looking for a business right around the time I was turning 27.
Okay, I love that. Um, did you come from a family of entrepreneurs? What was the burning passion to go? And okay, I'm leaving my world. You were in real estate, right? And some analysis areas. What was going on?
Yeah, no, I honestly loved my previous two roles in the commercial real estate world. I was at a group that did interest rate risk management for commercial clients. I was at a group that owned a bunch of multifamily across Colorado, and they were both great. I did not come from a family of entrepreneurs. I was never like the lemonade stand or lawn mowing kid. I did probably a little bit of that, but I was never, if you would have looked at me 20 years ago, you never would have thought I would be doing the entrepreneurial thing. Even 10 years ago when I was a chemistry major, I thought I'd either teach or go into ministry or do science. And business was never one of the options. I think along the way in real estate, commercial real estate, I was working with first medical office buildings, then offices, then multifamily, and got to see when you do real estate right, which a lot of people don't necessarily, there's a really cool actual win-win scenario there where the tenants benefit from the building being kept well and leased well and all of that kind of stuff. The people working at the building receive their paychecks and hopefully a good place to work. The people owning the building hopefully receive their returns. And when it's done well, it can be a really cool win-win scenario. And I think that's what opened my eyes to business as a whole. And then around the time I was 26, 27, I was just we were young, recently married, no kids yet. And I wanted to try my hand. The most recent group I was at real estate wise was started by two entrepreneurs, and maybe to their dismay, but they inspired me to
Hmm.
try my hand at the entrepreneurial thing and really was looking for a few things. One, ultimately a little bit more control over my time as we look towards having kids someday, not to just be fully remote and doing nothing, but to be able to be, okay, the buck stops here. I can control my schedule. I can be with my kids when I need to, be with my wife when I need to, all of that. But combine that with something that feels tangible and win-win. Because again, that was the only thing that got me into real estate. Otherwise, I just bless those who are able to see the beauty in stocks and bonds and all those things, but I just struggle too. So I wanted to find something that interested me and could meet sort of that flexibility in the long run, take a big risk now. My wife and I didn't have the money to do the real estate thing on our own, and 2022 was around the time rates were going up. So it wasn't eager to raise a fund doing that. So came across the concept of buying a small business, and it sort of ticked all those same boxes. and was probably even more win-win and more tangible than even real estate. Like I have just real employees who are on the payroll. We have real customers. We have a real product. And it just, I got excited about the concept as a whole, even maybe more so before I even found the specific business that I bought.
Okay, so what was some of the criterias? I knew you mentioned we had some hopes and dreams. We wanted you repeat the words win-win. It had to be a win for you and your wife and your hopes and dreams. It had to be win for the staff. It had to be win for the clients. I hear some of that. And then, but it was also time freedom. And what were some of the early criteria as you were hunting down a business? And how'd you go about finding one?
Yeah. So two good questions. The win-win was a big part. Yeah, I wanted it to be something that would be good for my wife and I and our future family. I wanted it to be something that I could at least be somewhat decent at for our future employees. I knew I might not be an expert in the world, but something that I could pick up on, I could be a helpful leader at, as well as for our customers. Beyond that, it got a little bit more practical. So they were looking for certain dollar amounts that I was making cash flow wise, was trying to at least replace my previous salary, even after the loan that we'd be taking on to buy it. So looking for something that makes more than that, take out some money for the loan. In retrospect, I probably should have aimed even higher than that. It's just a lot more work and risk and effort that I probably should have aimed notably higher than my previous salary, but you live and you learn.
Mhm.
And then there were certain industries I was avoiding. I was avoiding restaurants, retail, things that are just notoriously hard, unless you're really specialized at them. But yeah, generally looking for something where the numbers made sense. The business made sense, again, meaning not an industry that wasn't going to work. New construction wasn't super of interest to me. It's great when you're in it, but tough to take a big loan out on to buy. Um, And yeah, ideally something that in the long run would not require me to be the day-to-day operator, more to be the owner visionary role. So something that was big enough. I got really close in a group that only had four. It was three plus the owner, and I just eventually realized that it wasn't going to make sense to ultimately get towards that goal of pulling myself out of it eventually.
Okay, so now we're a year or so and change after the purchase.
Yeah.
Got these hopes and dreams, never done this before. Didn't really have a lot of mentors in your life at the time. I'm assuming you had some friends. I love the boldness. One, I want to give you props because I love the entrepreneur journey. I don't care if it's a startup, a buy up, or I fell in backwards. I'm an old missionary nonprofit guy that backed into owning mattress stores. So
Yeah.
it's like, how do you do that? And so, but now you're a year and change after and you've adopted somebody else's culture. What do you learn about some of those? Here are my hopes and dreams and my desired culture. This is what I purchased. Give us some wisdom takes on that world.
Yeah, I think part of, and just taking a quick step back to the business itself, I came across a bunch. I was looking at a biohazard cleanup company, an event rental company, so across the board. And again, I was probably more passionate about the like why a small business, like the beauty of being able to support local community, product, employees, all that good stuff. But this specific business, one of the things that stood out to me was the owners themselves. They were a couple, they had started it about 14 years ago. They were Christians. They treated the employees well. They treated the
Mm.
customers well. So one of the things that stood out beyond the numbers, the industry, whatever, checking the right boxes, is they had clearly created a good business. Both operationally, they had a lot of operation SOPs in place, but also just in culture. So that was actually a really big thing for me. I was wanted to be as cognizant as possible of buying something that had a bad culture. It's a little bit hard to get the gauge on that from the outside, but they had already set me up well in that. Um, Coming in though, yeah, I mean, I think I'm still very different from them in a lot of ways. I think as far as the big things, morals, values, guiding principles, we're aligned on a lot of it. But I think leadership wise, personality wise, I'm still a little bit different than them. Um, so yeah, I think there was a lot of trust building I had to do with the employees. I was
Mm.
younger than the previous owners by at least a decade. Um, I didn't have a background in the industry. Again, I knew real estate, I knew development and value add and that kind of stuff, but nothing about cabinet refinishing in particular. I knew a lot about a P&L and that kind of stuff, but that was sort of where it stopped. And then I just was willing to learn. So I think that last part is how I ultimately built the trust, was by showing that I'm willing to learn and maybe even admitting some of those things that I wasn't an expert in. Admitting I'm not an expert in cabinets, admitting I haven't necessarily run a small business before, but showing that I'm competent and willing to learn, I think helped a lot in the trust side. And I really said I thought it would be immediate. Um, I thought coming from my previous company, we were about the same size, 13 employees. If one of the owners left, I would have been like, oh, bummer, but keep doing my job.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that was not the reaction. It was much larger than that. And it wasn't necessarily, we don't want Jeremy here, but it was like, wow, those previous owners are great. Transition's scary. What does that mean for all of us? I tried to say from the beginning, we're really like, we're not restructuring anything. No one's getting laid off. Things might, I don't want to say things won't ever change, but there was no major overhaul coming. But I think really what worked was probably for the first 2 months or so, I was on site with my technicians, probably half my week every week. I was in the office all day, every day with the office, or the other half of the day with the office staff. Previous owners had gotten to the point where they weren't necessarily in the office all day, every day. It was sort of running smoothly, and they were so good at things they didn't need to be there all the time because they were just experts at it. So having me there all day every day, I also live about an hour and a half away from the business. So I think the employees saw that and really respected that a lot.
Mm.
That helped in gaining the trust. And again, a lot of the culture stuff was already there.
Yeah. So that word trust. Oh my gosh, there's books on it in Acumen world. We've had speakers come to advance on it. I referenced David Horsager. I think he's a great one on trust. The Trust Shield, I believe, is the one I read. And you've got other things, speed of trust. What have you learned? Because you are one of the more trusting people I know. You trust others really well. You're really sincere. You believe in them. But what have you learned about trust now in the last year and a half?
Yeah, that's funny. I would never describe myself as like trusting, but I probably am. I think I just generally assume, I think it's a Christian part of me that says like, yeah, we should assume the best of others, which relates to trust. Obviously there's a whole tendency towards sin there, but yeah, I tend to assume the best in others. But yeah, I think I learned that my view of that is not necessarily the broader view, and
Hmm.
that you do your time and effort spent building not just like relationships, but just more broadly trust. And I say that because these days I was working on site with the guys. Like I might only work with one of our 10 technicians that day, but I was building trust amongst like, all of them.
Hmm.
The fact that I was on site. So I think just, yeah, learn that it doesn't always come quickly.
Hmm.
Despite how friendly and kind I might find myself to be and whatever. I was a stranger to all of these people. It's a
Yeah.
big transition. Their livelihoods and paychecks from their perspective were on the line. So realizing that, okay, this isn't quite as of a simple transition as I thought it might be. So now I need to put in even more time and effort than I thought I was going to have to make it work. Because ultimately, I want them to be comfortable there. I want them to trust me
Mhm.
so that I can lead it well. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not like they were opposed to having an owner that was more remote or off-site because they lived that way prior. But
Yeah.
when a new human and a new fear, I think people, maybe it's our staff as we run businesses, and I speak to the general listening of the podcast, our staff, and when there's transition from leadership groups, although nothing may change at all structurally, accountability wise, a new human assumes that role. I think people's initial fears kick in, going, what is this new person, Jeremy, going to do to our company?
Totally.
And so you think, well, I'm just replacing a remote work owner with myself. This should be pretty smooth. But we forget that there's these human relationships and trust. You always hear this comment, when trust is broken, how do you reestablish trust? And not that you broke trust, but you often hear it takes time.
Yeah.
And one of the hardest parts is that your time was also an hour and a half away
Yeah.
in the commute. Um, what did you, now you're on the tail end of this, what have you learned that's gone really well that you're like, I'm really proud of this last year or so?
Yeah, I think the trust thing was probably something that was much harder than I expected, but went well. Um, and I think I'm, yeah, proud of the way that that went. And beyond just putting the time and effort, but something I've heard from a lot of my guys was just being willing to listen,
Mm.
especially knowing, maybe it's like, I think it's actually easier for me, but from their perspective was especially knowing that I'm not an expert and could just sort of jump in and assume a bunch. For me, it was easier because I'm not an expert in our field. So all I really had to do was listen, or could do was listen. Um, but I think I'm proud of the way that I was able to listen to the team, listen what they want, try to do the best I can to meet those needs of the employees, and then try when I can't to communicate why not. Um, yeah, I think listening well, hopefully acting upon it, and when I can't, communicating why not was something that seemed to go well over this last year.
Excellent. Now you're a year in. I think one of the great parts of what God allows us to go through in life is we have little bumps and bruises and scars. And some of mine seem like gaping wounds from the past in business, and some really great memories and successes. Um, but you grow in those. You get a bigger picture of who God is. You get a bigger picture of who you are. You're growing as a leader. What are some of the areas that you've seen that you just it surprised you? It was been really hard. You didn't know this when you bought a business.
Yeah, I think probably what most of the, at least acumen listeners of this would know is I knew just being a business owner would be really hard. Um, just the late nights up in bed, tossing and turning kind of thing. I knew it would be hard, and I think it was still has been harder than I even expected. It's always that funny. Like, I knew it's gonna be harder than than I expect, and it's still harder than I couldn't expect. Um, so I think that has just been a very real thing, and that's just been stressors related to cash flow and retention and sales and profitability and the commute and all of that good stuff. So I think there's just been a lot of things where you are the buck stops here owner. You are the one who, in my case, buying a business, have a personal guarantee on the line. Um, that just create for a different kind of stress that you don't have even in a very stressful W-2 scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's definitely just been a big thing. I think the other thing I've probably been working on a lot over the last year, I started going to therapy since I bought a business, but um,
I think you're not alone there. I think many of us have gone to therapy, and God has used business to help grow us as a whole person. It's not and I know you don't think this way. You don't separate business and personal and marriage and friendships. It's more you're a more whole, united thinker that it all impacts each other. And so sometimes we just, yeah, I got to go to therapy to work through some junk.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, and it's very much been that. I think I've always been a little bit of a people pleaser. I've always been somewhat conflict averse. So I think the business has just brought that out now that I have, again, a personal guarantee on the line, caring about retention when I am so far away, all that good stuff has just brought out anytime someone seems slightly dissatisfied or unhappy about something, whether or not it even is something that I did wrong or that was like an objective wrong or just a difference in preference. I think I've struggled to not take that very personally and very like maybe not personal, like I'm mad at it, but it just causes me a lot of stress.
Yeah.
Um, so that's probably been the biggest thing I've been working on over the last year through the business.
I can't remember if we've talked about this, but there's a concept that I've been noodling on, it's benevolent detachment.
Hmm.
And I think as business owners, that might be something that maybe you and I dive in the future. It's like, okay, I'm doing my job, but I can be benevolent, I can be caring, I can be kind, but I
Yeah.
probably need to detach my identity and myself from the results. Okay, now I want you to speak to the business owner currently that's thinking about selling.
Yeah.
You have a different perspective. We hear a lot of exit planners and M&A brokers and people that are saying, hey, I can sell your business. But you give those business owners that are thinking about exiting and selling it on the private market, What some lessons or things that they should be looking for to help the transition go well for their people, for the business, themselves, and the new owner?
Yeah, that's a good question. And honestly, my gut reaction is a lot of it actually probably aligns with what exit planners are talking about of making sure operational systems are in place, making sure cash flow has stable recurring streams, all of that good stuff that make it more appealing to a buyer. I mean, I would say I don't know business owners awareness, but I am not the only young guy doing this these days. It is very much become sort of a new popular means of uh, both career pivots and investments for younger people, or for mid-career wanting to get out of the corporate world, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's much more common than even needing to work your way up to be the size that or the industry or whatever that private equity might be interested in. Like my business, the one I took over, was definitely too small for most private equity groups, was all project-based revenue, a lot of things that wouldn't check a lot of those boxes, but made perfect sense for a guy like me looking to make a pivot. So yeah, I guess first thing would be just know that there's a lot of that out there. There is a lot of interest out there these days, even with interest rates where they are and all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would talk to brokers. I would even, talk to their ETA, entrepreneurship through acquisition, is a big thing these days. There's probably groups meeting up in your city. You could even go there and start meeting with guys if you really want to sort of hand pick your successor, because people going there are all wanting to buy a business.
Cool.
Um, but otherwise, the people who sold to me did a really good job in a lot of it. They were very honest throughout the DD process in a way that helped build trust. So the due diligence didn't feel like we were constantly fighting against each other. Is that they would tell me something that might even be slightly negative on their end. And it was like, oh, okay, great. So now I'm not questioning everything else you sent me. So they were great at building trust. And again, all this said, we were like a much smaller, we're about 2 million in revenue. So we're probably smaller than a handful of folks listening to this. You might not be directly involved in the DD process, whatever that looks like, but they were very transparent and honest in a way that was really helpful. They did have operations in place. They did have a manager that ran a lot of the show. Definitely not quite all of the show. And that's something I probably would recommend to people. Try to figure out, are you able to step in all the way? Are you relying on someone that you may or may not met before? Thankfully, the person that they had in place has been amazing. So
Yes.
that was, again, things that they set up well. I think she had been around for really only 2 years prior to them selling, maybe not even quite. So I think they had sort of started putting the pieces into place. Amazing operations manager. And then they had a good bit of sort of operating procedures, all that kind of stuff that I know are highly recommended, but they honestly, like, none of that was like perfect, but they had at least existing processes that helped. Final thing there was they were great in the final. They were sort of on call for the year following the transition. They were in the office every day with me for like almost 2 months, and then
Wow.
they were on call once they moved away. And they were amazing, and that is very uncommon. Even if it's contractually obligated, a lot of owners will just disappear entirely, and they were
Yeah.
incredible.
I love that. And so I'm hearing some things as we wrap up, some lessons learned. On a tactical side, aim higher
Yeah.
on the price point and the net income. Two words that came up, how to make this transition easier on the seller side, but also the buyer side, is a key word is trust. And I heard you say a lot, I listened well. And I think those are some really good lessons learned. How are you personally being sharpened, challenged, and encouraged now and inspired now? What's doing that for you? Yes, there's the business piece, but what's keeping you sharp?
Yeah. On the business side, again, I didn't come from an entrepreneurial world at all. My friends were not necessarily entrepreneurs. My family was not. So I didn't have that network as much as I had wonderful friends who'd crushed it in the corporate world. So I had to find that a little bit more. I still have a good friend or two that I talk to pretty regularly who are just in the corporate world, but just have good management, good wisdom experience. And honestly, joining Acumen about 6 or 7 months ago, I think was really helpful for me because I just, again, didn't have other small business
Mhm.
owners to go talk to. Um, their wisdom, their insight, also their pushings and promptings have all been really good.
Sometimes hard and sometimes not necessarily right. So it's
Yeah.
not like it's not sovereign information that's inerrant without error. Sometimes they poke and you're like, I don't know if I like that, but it's changed you. And Jeremy, you're a really good processor. Well, where can we find more information about your business? Where can we find you?
Yeah, I don't really have anything. I got LinkedIn, Jeremy Hunka, and summitcabinetcoatings.com.
Hey, if I'm in Northern Colorado and I'm thinking about getting my cabinets done, you got any intro offers or anything like that that'll win these people over?
I'm sure we could find something for you.
Yeah, hit him up and say, hey, I know him personally through the Sharpen podcast. Well, I want to thank you. I appreciate you as a friend, as a member in Acumen. I think you provide a ton of value. I think your wisdom, and I know you don't always see it, but I think your wisdom in this experience is profound. And as the years go along, there's going to be chapters in a book going, oh, I would have done this better. I'm grateful for this. I really grew in this. And so the rest of you, thanks for listening to Jeremy's wisdom and experiences. And where can you find Acumen and who are we? We're at acumenimpact.com. And if you're looking for local resources to join a team, click down on some of the resources, events. We've got happy hours that flow in Kansas City, in Colorado. We're opening up in Phoenix here soon. And we look forward to meeting you. Thank you again.
Thank you, Steve.